I got tagged. I'm gonna tell you about my worst backpacking trip. What's up everybody, I'm Dan and welcome back to Backpacking Adventures, where we talk about everything backpacking, hiking, and gear. And if those interest you and you're new to this channel, consider subscribing and make sure you hit that bell notification so you don't miss a thing. Now, we've all had our good trips and our bad trips. So Dave from Off Grid started a new tag video called #worst backpacking trip. And basically it's to talk about what your worst backpacking trip was. And Dave tagged me, so in today's video, I'm gonna tell you what my worst backpacking trip was. Dave is new to YouTube and he has a great channel named Off Grid. And he talks about backpacking and all kinds of gear and goes on many trips. So make sure you check out his channel. I'll put a link to this channel and the channels that I'm gonna tag in the description. Now let's get into my worst backpacking trip. Now just some background, I'm located in central Pennsylvania and I pretty much only hiked in Pennsylvania. So my experiences with backpacking are really limited to Pennsylvania, but I am grateful that I live in a state that has just so many backpacking trails. And really, from any of the trailheads in Pennsylvania, I think I only have to travel like 3 to 4 hours tops. Now, I've been backpacking for many years and I've had my good trips and my not so good trips. But overall, it's hard to pick what my worst backpacking trip was. In just about every one of my trips, I always have that time where I just think, man, this really sucks. Some trips, I'm just sore and I hurt all over. Some of them, it rains a lot and I'm just soaking wet the whole time. And some of them I just bailed on. And in almost every trip, I always end up either lost or going in the wrong direction. I don't think I've ever had a trip where nothing went wrong, everything went as planned, had no gear failures. So, you know, that's just all part of it. You take the good with the bad. And they always say, usually those bad experiences make for some of the best memories. So I guess the trip that I'm gonna classify as in the worst category of my backpacking trips is my first backpacking trip. And I think a lot of you will agree that your first backpacking trips probably weren't that great as well. Back in the early 2000s, I think it was like 2004 or 2005, is when I had my first true backpacking trip. The trip was in north central Pennsylvania and it was on a trail that I've hiked several times since then, and it's the Sox Trail. It was basically an out and back trip where we would hike 7 miles in from World's End State Park to Soanes Pond and then back the next day. And actually, Soanes Pond is really one of my favorite places to camp. I have several videos where I've had camping trips there. So why is this my worst trip? What makes it stand out and makes me put it in that worst category? Well, there's several reasons for that. And like all of you, with this being my first trip, there was a whole bunch of things I just could have done a lot better. But nowadays, it's a lot easier to do research. You have YouTube. Back then, at least as far as I know, there wasn't YouTube videos or backpacking videos out there, again, at least that I know of, where I could do research and learn about what I needed to do with backpacking. So the first thing was my food choices, or actually lack thereof. Basically, the biggest mistake I made with the food was not realizing that I'm gonna need more calories in that day than I would in just a normal day of being in the office or being at home. I didn't take into account hiking all day with a heavy backpack, which I'm gonna get into a little bit, and up and down over mountains and all the different rocky terrain. I just didn't take any of that into account. And all of that equates to a higher calorie need. So basically, as an example, the food I took was, for a lunch, was a 1 packet of Lipton cup of soup. And that thing only has like 100 calories, period. And that's all I had for lunch, maybe a snack or two. And then for dinner, I had a little can of chicken, a little can of corn, and a packet of mashed potatoes, and I shared that and split it between 2 people. And I also had a couple snacks throughout the day, some little Neutral Valley bars and things like that, but nowhere near what I needed. So basically, I went to bed hungry that night, and there was no way that I had enough food, and I felt it. Usually, if you have a long day of hiking and you're a little tired and sore, as long as you have a really good meal, it's high protein, fat, and carbs, you can pretty much recover. But if not, it's gonna make for a tougher next day. And again, the worst part of that was going to bed hungry, and I'm talking hungry, and waking up hungry. And I think the next day, I can't remember what I had for the life of me, what I had for breakfast. I don't even know if I brought breakfast, but I would have eaten that. And I know I also ate what my lunch was gonna be, because I knew I was so hungry that I just had to get something in so I can make it back the rest of the trip. And I felt so sore and I was so tired, and then added to that, I was just so hungry the whole way back. So I think that was really one of the lessons learned from that trip, was rethinking my entire way of thinking about food. All right, so the next one. The next one was my extremely heavy backpack. On this trip, I way overpacked. My pack weighed, fully loaded, well over 50 pounds, probably pushing 60. I just took so much gear. I just basically tripled up on almost everything because I wanted to make sure I'd survive. I took a couple knives, and I'm not talking my little Swiss Army knife that I take now. I'm talking I had big bushcrafting knives, and I had a couple of them. And I had several flashlights, and not really a headlamp, but I'm telling you, I had these big flashlights that were like 1,000 lumens. And I had a bunch of them. And I also had extra batteries. I packed extra clothes to hike in, all different kinds of clothes to sleep in. I even packed a couple pairs of jeans. And all this for just one night out on the trail. Now, my pack was just so heavy, and if you understand the stretch of World's End State Park to Soane's Ponds, it's actually one of the hardest parts of the Loyal Sox Trail. It's basically a roller coaster up and down. So I had to do that with that heavy pack, and I just wasn't prepared for it. Yes, I was in shape, a lot better shape than I am in now. But before that trip, I did a couple day hikes, but I did not have a heavy pack on. I did not have a fully loaded pack, which I do now. Every time I go on a day pack, it's my fully loaded pack to strengthen my legs. But back then, I just went on a couple day hikes and thought, hey, that's gonna be good enough. And I know the next morning, when I woke up, packed up, and was ready to go, I dreaded putting that backpack back on. I was already sore from the day before, already tired, and I was still hungry, and I knew I had to put that pack on and carry it back. And you know, a lot of people hike with 50-pound packs, and I did since then, and I got used to it and I was okay. But when it's your first basically backpacking / hiking experience with that heavy pack, man, it just killed my legs. And the next day pretty much was just worrying about if I'm gonna make it back. And the next thing was, on top of being hungry, being tired and sore, I didn't sleep pretty much the entire night. Now, that's expected the first night, my first night in the woods, and I was anxious and everything else. But on top of that, at Soane's Pond, there were those infamous coyotes. They were hooting and howling all night long. And you know, this was my first trip out there, and I was terrified, absolutely terrified that I was gonna get eaten by a pack of coyotes. And they were really close, at least it sounded close at night, and I was convinced I was gonna die. I had all my bushcrafting big knives under my pillow, ready to go. They were out of their sheaths, and I was ready to fight them off. And all night long, I didn't sleep a wink. And the lack of sleep just added to that misery the next day of, you know, being hungry, being sore, and being tired, not just from hiking, but from not sleeping at all. Since then, I've been back to Soane's Pond a couple times. I love that area to hike. Coyotes don't bother you. And really, the one lesson I learned is I just use earplugs and I don't hear them. And if I don't hear them, they're not there. So lastly, this is more of a hindsight thing, and it has to do with how I stored my food. And because basically, I didn't hang it. I had no idea you even had to do that. I had no idea that it would draw animals in, no clue. So, just didn't hang my food. What I do, well, I just put it in the top brain part of my backpack, and I set my backpack on the tree next to my tent. Didn't know any different. And that could have ended badly, I guess. It could have actually drawn in those coyotes, or even worse, a bear. But in the end, nothing got to my food, nothing even touched my backpack all night. So I got lucky, I guess. I've done a lot of research since then, and I always hang my food. So those were just some of the things that really just made my trip worse. And the first couple of them kind of added to each other and accumulated to my misery. And basically the misery was on the second day. And I really just think it was my worst trip because it was my first trip. And that's all part of the process of backpacking. And backpacking, yes, is a process. You grow as a backpacker and you learn from your mistakes as you go. And at that time, I had the least amount of knowledge you could have and no experience at all whatsoever. I didn't die on that trip, even though I was convinced I was going to, but I did learn a lot. I did learn more so of what not to do. So that was my worst backpacking trip. Now it's time to tag somebody, and I'm gonna tag two people. First, I'm gonna tag a channel, Paxalot. Paxalot is out of Utah, and he has a great channel. He hikes all over the place. He talks about gear. He does a lot of day hikes, a lot of backpacking trips, so make sure you check out his channel. Second, I'm gonna tag Brad from As the Crows Flies Hiking. He's another one with a great channel, backpacking trips. He backpacks all over the place, and he talks a lot about gear, so check out his channel. He was the originator of the hashtag #MyFavoriteTrail tag video that went around that I also did, and I think it would be cool to hear from him on what his worst backpacking trip was. And if you have a YouTube channel, you know, this is open to everybody. You can do your own YouTube video and then tag some other people and get this moving. Tell me what your worst backpacking trip was in the comments below, and we'll have a conversation about it. And if you like this video, make sure you subscribe and like and share and all that. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.